Lately, I've caught myself doing something that I don't think is very healthy. Every time I start learning something new, I immediately look at someone who's been doing it for years. Golf, software engineering, Amazon Web Services, artificial intelligence, even this YouTube channel. Then I compare where I am to where they are. And somehow, I walk away feeling like I'm not making any progress at all. The strange thing about it is, I know it's irrational. I know that they've spent years building the skills that I admire. But somehow, my brain still expects me to catch up and perform at that level in just a few months, or a few weeks, or sometimes even just a few days. Over these last few months, I've spent a lot of time thinking about learning and development and improvement. We've talked about imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome, about taking ownership of our careers, why motivation isn't nearly as important as having a system or a plan and taking action. But there's another trap that I don't think gets discussed nearly enough. That sometimes we are improving and we don't even realize it. Not because the progress isn't happening, because we're measuring it against the wrong thing. Golf has been teaching me this lesson nearly every week. I'll be at the driving range, and someone a few stalls down just absolutely crushes a drive. Perfect contact. The kind of ball flight that makes everyone at the range stop and look. Meanwhile, I'm over here trying to understand why my driver launched 6 degrees lower than it did yesterday, or why my carry distance is 10 yards less than my last hit. And it's easy to think, I'll never get there. But then I stop and I think about it. I have no idea how long they've been playing. Maybe they've been golfing for 20 years. Maybe they played in college. Maybe they've had lessons every week for the last decade. I'm comparing one afternoon of my journey to an unknown number of years on theirs. That's not really a comparison. That's self-sabotage. I did exactly the same thing when I became a software engineer. I'd look at senior engineers and think, how do they know all of this? They understood architecture, cloud infrastructure, system design. Everything seemed effortless. What I couldn't see was the thousands of hours that came before that. I probably wasn't watching someone who was naturally gifted. More likely, I was watching someone who had already climbed the mountain I had just started. And somehow, I expected my first few years to look like their 10th or their 20th. I think one of the hardest parts about learning as an adult is that progress becomes invisible almost immediately. The first time you solve a difficult coding problem, you remember it. The 100th time, you don't even think about it. The first time you successfully hit a draw or a fade with your driver, it's exciting. A year later, it's just your normal shot. Every improvement eventually becomes your baseline. And I think that's why progress is so hard to recognize. Once something becomes normal, your brain stops trying to give you credit for it. It starts looking for the next thing that you can't do yet. One thing that I've noticed throughout my career, every time I solve one problem, I discover a bigger one. When I started learning software engineering, I thought writing code was the hard part. Then I learned about testing, then architecture, then cloud computing, and now artificial intelligence. The mountain didn't actually get taller. My perspective did. Every step upward lets me see farther. And every new horizon reveals another mountain I couldn't even see before. Not because I'm falling behind, but because every step reveals something I wasn't able to see before. The same thing's happening with golf. A few months ago, I was just hoping to make decent contact with the ball. Honestly, I was just hoping I remembered how to swing the club. But now I'm paying attention to strike patterns, my launch angle, carry distance, club speed. I didn't even know enough to care about these things before. The game didn't get harder. The job didn't get harder. My understanding got deeper. I wonder how different life would feel if we spent less time looking sideways and a little more time looking backward. The version of me that walked into a software engineering boot camp would probably be amazed by what I do today. The version of me that pulled his old golf clubs out of storage earlier this year would probably be excited about the consistency that I'm starting to build. The version of me that uploaded the first video of this channel would probably laugh if he saw how much time I spent now thinking about microphones, lighting, editing, thumbnails, and effective storytelling. Heck, I remember checking my YouTube analytics after I published the first video. I had a dozen or so views, a handful of subscribers. But my first thought wasn't, I'm glad I finally started. It was, why isn't this growing faster? And then I caught myself. I had spent years watching creators with hundreds of videos, thousands of hours behind the camera, possibly entire production teams. And somehow, I expected my very first upload to compete with theirs. That's the comparison trap. Not because those creators don't deserve their success, but because I completely ignored where they started and where I had just begun. None of those improvements happened overnight. Most of them probably happened so gradually that I barely noticed them, because they didn't happen all at once. They happened one ordinary day at a time. There's a phrase that I've heard before. Don't compare your chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 20. I like that. But I think I'd take it one step further. Maybe we shouldn't compare ourselves to anyone else's story at all. Maybe the better comparison is this. Am I a little better than I was 6 months ago? Am I handling challenges differently? Am I learning? Am I becoming more capable? Am I showing up consistently? Because that's a comparison that I can actually take action and do something about. The truth is, there will always be someone with more experience than I have. Someone who plays better golf, someone who writes better code, has more certifications, makes better videos. And that's okay. Because maybe we've been measuring ourselves backward. We measure ourselves by everything that we still can't do, instead of measuring everything we couldn't do before. We measure the distance that's left instead of the distance we've traveled. I mean, no wonder growth feels invisible. Maybe that's why progress doesn't feel like progress. Maybe we've been looking in the wrong direction. We spend so much time looking ahead, measuring everything we still can't do, that we forget to look back. We forget how far we've already come. We've become so focused on the next step that we've stopped appreciating the steps we've already taken. The things that once felt impossible have become ordinary. And because they feel ordinary, we stop counting them as progress. But ordinary isn't the absence of growth. It's the evidence of it. So if you're feeling behind, if you're feeling stuck, stop looking sideways. Stop only looking forward and take a look back. The bugs that you can solve now, the golf shots you don't even think about anymore, the conversations that you can have, and the confidence that you've quietly built. Those things didn't happen overnight. They happened one ordinary day at a time. Progress isn't always obvious while you're living it. Sometimes you only recognize it when you finally turn around. Because the person that you are today is someone your past self was working incredibly hard to become. And maybe that's all the evidence you need. Not great, just a little better than yesterday.